Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, look folks, I'm not even going to try and come up with a hook and a date hook for this one. Look, this day and some year, someone took a walk at night. There's your hook for those of you who desire our usual hook. But look, here's what we're up to on this episode. Today we're going to do a brief social and political history of walking at night, which is the act of, you guessed it, going for a walk when the sun is not up. But this simple act has all sorts of ramifications and tells us a lot about changing culture and politics and ourselves. And on that last note, it actually serves as really great fodder for a podcast series. There is a new season out now of what I think is one of the most creative podcasts in the world. It's called Constellation Prize from The Believer magazine. It is hosted by Bianca Giaever, and the new season is all about walking at night, something that Bianca started doing as part of a correspondence with the poet Terry Tempest Williams. In the series, Bianca uses these night walks and these audio diaries that she exchanges with Williams to explore things like faith and love and community and nature and the kind of stuff that you can only think about when you're going for a long walk at night. But there is a little bit of social history in the series, and I was talking to Bianca about how she'd done a bunch of historical research on night walking that didn't make it into Constellation Prize, so this is our chance to talk a little bit about that and our excuse to have her on the show. So Bianca Giaever, host of Constellation Prize, thank you for coming on this day, and congratulations on the new season. It's quite beautiful. Thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
And of course, here, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Jody, I feel like we missed a chance to call this night in esoteric political history.
Gosh. This night in
just hanging there.
Ambulation or whatever. Yes. But yeah, it's true. Well, I actually want to know if, I know you have, Bianca, you did a whole series about it, but Kellie and NIki, do you take walks at night?
No.
Okay.
I'm a big scaredy pants. I live in the woods and I'm terrified by everything that moves around me. One time I had to walk to my mailbox and it was getting close to dark. I don't really play around with darkness. I don't. I will have a flashlight on me or use my cell phone. My cell phone is a pretty bright flashlight, but no, I'm not a fan.
I walk my dog at night. So yes, I'm out there skittering around with my little pup, and also I grew up in the country, and we always walked around, whether over to the neighbors or just to check out the stars at night.
Yeah. So Bianca, I mean, before we get into some of this sort of social and political history, I mean, part of the story, right, of this series that you tell so beautifully is I think you started maybe a little where Kellie was. You're a little skeptical of this, and then Terry Tempest Williams, this poet who you start this correspondence with, kind of makes you fall in love with night walking. You want to talk a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned your dog because there is a huge difference between walking at night with a dog and without a dog, I've noticed, especially in the country. I was going on night walks in rural Vermont, and when people saw me, a woman out at night in the dark walking on a country road without a flashlight and without a dog, they were very worried. Mm-hmm. It was suddenly felt very transgressive. People would pull over and ask if I was okay. And the attitude was very much like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And this isn't okay. And I was just like, no, I just enjoy night walking. You should try it. But yeah, some background on the series. It was deep pandemic 2020. And Terry Tempest Williams was a total stranger to me at the time. And she wrote to me out of the blue and said, I would love to do an audio project with you. And I was humbled and flattered and honored. And I was like, okay, I'll do whatever you say. She's a famous environmental writer and activist who I really admire. And she was like, great, I will go to sleep. And in my dreams, I will summon our project. And I was like, this is not my way of working. So I was like, okay, great. Clearly she's in touch with something. I was like, this person is much more of an artist than I am. And she woke up the next morning and wrote to me in an audio letter that I later lost saying, in my dreams, I realized the project we should do, we should go on night walks together. I mean, not together, but we should both go on night walks alone in our separate locations every night between the new moon and the full moon, and write each other letters after each night walk about what comes up for us. And Terry's done night walking for a long time, but I think she particularly relied on it in the pandemic, such a scary and lonely time. And practically speaking, in Utah where she lived, it was incredibly hot, so she had to walk at night to get outside. And she really sees night walking as a metaphor for walking through fear and the unknown. For her, it's a way of coping with grief, losing yourself, finding yourself, and surrendering in a way, and moving through that tension of between what you can see and what you can't see, which is always there when you're night walking. And of course, your mind naturally fills in the blanks of what it can't see. And so it's a really interesting experience, particularly as an artist or as a writer, but really for anyone to see, like, what images does your mind conjure? And yeah, it's a way of kind of dreaming while also being awake.
That's really powerful.
I think that connection between dreaming and possibility and kind of a mix of fear and the unknown, this fits into some of the history that goes along with the idea of night as a scary space, right? That's full of demons and witchcraft, that kind of old school way of thinking about the night. And like during the Enlightenment era, the idea was not to be in your head dreaming and fantasizing. It was the bright light of day that was actually where it was at, right? That things were being illuminated with reason and with knowledge. But night really takes center stage during that more romantic period, when there is a sense that you can let go of some of those rational strictures and let something else, whatever else that was, whether it was scary or whether it was powerful in the way that you've been talking about, let that take over and be kind of the center of the way you think about the world around you.
Exactly. Yeah, the Romantics really reclaimed the night after the Enlightenment. A lot of writers started writing about the night. Wordsworth in particular, that's when you have Edgar Allan Poe writing his stories. So again, people begin to embrace the mystery of the night and embrace what we don't know in the Romantic period.
I don't know if it's a coincidence or, it makes total sense, but, it's like as we got better and better at lighting the world, people became more interested in kind of seeking out darkness. And moreover, Walter Benjamin writes about, I remember reading this ages ago, but really being moved by it, but, just sort of pushing back against modernity by going on long walks and just sort of exploring and getting lost, right? And you sort of see that sense come up as, during modernity and the Industrial Revolution, a real push towards ambulation and darkness.
Yeah, there's a backlash against the overly lit spaces. And like you were saying, industrialization, the daytime becomes associated with productivity, capitalism, and the night is a space that no one is telling you what to do. It's your own space. It's a space for artists to find solace and quiet.
When you walk at night, do you walk with a reflector vest or something like that? Or you have no flashlight, no mace?
Yeah,
what do you walk
it's a good question. I don't walk with anything, but the thing is, when you're in the country, you can see and hear a car coming from a mile away. So there'll be like a long buildup, and it's actually gorgeous the way the headlights illuminate the landscape as a car approaches. So when I see or hear a car coming, I'll walk like 5 feet off the road and be kind of creepily crouched there. And that's when people will actually get more scared of me than I am of them, because they're not expecting to see a person on the side of the road. But I should wear a reflector vest. That's a great idea.
Yeah, just maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe.
That's today's takeaway.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know if Charles Dickens wore a reflector vest or not, but he was a famous night walker. He wrote a book. He wrote an essay called Night Walks. But he reportedly was suffering from insomnia, and I guess part of the story is here, if you're up in the middle of the night, go for a walk. But it was also in a really tumultuous period of his life, and I wonder, it sounds to me like people can listen to the series and really kind of come to understand this, but I don't know, Bianca, do you feel like it's, COVID, Terry seems to be going through some stuff, you seem to be going through some stuff. It seems like walking at night is particularly a place where people go to work some things out.
Yeah, it is. a habit of the slightly disturbed person. I remember going through a breakup and feeling like I couldn't sleep and like I was so restless. I had no choice but to get up and just walk the streets. And Charles Dickens is a famous night walker. He wrote about night walking. He also self-mythologized his night walks quite a bit, so it's a little hard to know exactly how much he was night walking, but he claims to have walked, up to 25 miles on any given night. And he has beautiful descriptions of the hallucinations he experienced, his interactions with other people who are also up at these strange hours, and daybreak and how exciting it was, and the relief of when it's finally light again, people are stirring, and he would go get his breakfast in a certain part of London, and just the comforts of returning to the day after being on this long hallucinatory odyssey throughout the night. And so I think he drew a lot of inspiration in his work from these night walks. And there was a period, one March, where he claims that he was like not sleeping and walking almost every night. And of course, the less you sleep, the more dreamlike your walks become.
Right.
You're used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting The World Together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
I wonder, does it make a difference too if you are walking in Brooklyn as opposed to walking in Vermont? Those are two totally different experiences. Do you have to be in sort of a nature sure, you could walk through Prospect Park or wherever at night, but does it matter sort of the location of where you're walking or your surroundings? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a very different experience. And in the podcast, I transition from walking in the country to walking in the city. And for me, walking in a rural area is more about confronting yourself. And sometimes literally it would be so dark where I couldn't even feel where my body ended. It sounds so strange. Like each step you take, it feels a bit like you're falling and sort of blending into the environment. And in the city, for me, it's much more about interactions with other strangers and other people who are up at that hour and are also wandering, because especially in New York City, you're not alone. And there are people walking their dogs at all hours in New York. And so for me, it's more about like who else is up now and why. But I do feel a degree of solidarity at certain hours with the other people who are also awake. And Dickens describes this as well in London, the eye contact that you make with those people. And you're much more aware of the contrast between the light and the shadows, the lit areas and the dark areas, when you're in the city as opposed to in the country when it's all dark. And in the country, it's much more about the moon cycles. And because we walked from the new moon to the full moon, the landscape was slowly revealed over the course of the project. And you notice the clouds much more because the amount of light you're going to get depends on how cloudy it is. But I think like in the city, there's night walking, but then there's also, like we were saying, just letting more darkness into your life and appreciating darkness more, even though we can now flick a switch and have light whenever we want it. And there's an essay I really love by Junichiro Tanizaki called In Praise of Shadows, where he talks about how much he enjoys seeing a small glimpse of flesh folded into someone's clothing more than a fully naked body, or how much more he enjoys eating sushi in a dark room and enjoying the contrast, between the white rice and the dark room. And then he even takes it to the bathroom, to the toilet, where he says that he doesn't want to go to the bathroom in a really bright room because it's probably not fully clean, and he really enjoys he like really gets into the details about like using the toilet on a misty morning in the shadows looking outside. And I'm like, okay, this guy's going deep into his aesthetic contemplation of the night, but it was also coming from a place of real concern and like the light represents like, this Western drive for progress to light everything. And so it in the end, it's a plea for particularly artists and writers to praise the shadows and remind people that there's value to sitting in the dark or walking in the dark, whatever it is, if they can safely. Obviously.
There's such an interesting duality, and I think even just using the word safety or doing it safely underscores this, which is one of the reasons why the romantics and artists and others are drawn to the night is because there is a kind of sense of freedom, a loss of constraints, especially like social constraints, that those begin to fall away when it becomes dark. You think about kind of the trope of staying up late and talking deep into the night. And as the night gets deeper and deeper, you're bearing your soul more and more because it's nighttime and that's what you do. But the loss of those constraints is scary as well, because it means that, people are doing things that maybe they wouldn't do in the daytime that can be endangering in some ways. Certainly, like, law enforcement freaks out a little bit whenever it's night. It's why you get curfews during times of social unrest, because they're like, oh, it's fine during the day, but once night falls, that's where everybody loses their minds. And that duality of it is so interesting to me.
Totally. Yeah, that's what's so seductive about being out at night, I think, is the mixture of liberation, but also risk. And one of the historians I spoke to who covers the early modern period talked about this a lot. I was surprised to learn that nighttime was liberating both for the aristocratic class and the peasant class. Like, there's one group who's free from their employers, but then there's another group that's free from the societal expectations that go on during the day. And so these groups would mix at taverns late at night, but in order to get there, they would have to trek through darkness, where they literally believed they were facing the devil, and where it was a type of darkness that we don't even really experience anymore in most places in the world. And so people would have to familiarize themselves with the route to the tavern in a very specific way, know where every well is, where every bush is that they could trip over. Sometimes people would move their furniture to the walls at night. He said it was common to know exactly how many stairs are on your staircase. And people were very used to wandering around in the middle of the night in complete darkness and being able to get around.
I think about, like, it's probably a story I've told before, but like the story of Frederick Douglass's mother, who she would work like from sunup to sundown, and then she would walk 12 miles to where Frederick Douglass was housed on another plantation. And it would all happen at night. And this would be a round trip event where she would walk 12 miles there in the middle of the night, spend a couple hours with him, sleep with him for a couple hours, and then walk the 12 miles back and have to get back before the sun is up. So you're walking, but you're also risking a lot, because if you're caught, you're walking fast because you don't have a lot of time, and the slower you walk, the less time you have with your loved one. But like all that would take place in that walk, like, and how worth it was for her to do basically a marathon in one night, to have an hour or two to sleep with her toddler son. It's just incredible to me.
We were talking a little bit before we started recording just about this idea of the night as a space of resistance in many ways. So many of the stories we've done about slave revolts or rebellions, the plotting happens at night, obviously, and because it's the only time, as you were saying, Bianca, like when certain groups can have space and time to talk with each other. And then also, walking as well. I mean, so much of the civil rights movement, it was these walks, we think about the freedom walks in Alabama and just sort of connecting these cities and like using your body in the physical space as an act of protest. So it all feels like it's really connected in that way. All right. Now, as we wrap up, I want to spring something on you. Bianca, do you know the 1914 poem called Abraham Lincoln Walks at Midnight?
I do not.
So there's a poem written in 1914 by the poet Vachel Lindsay, and it portrays Abraham Lincoln walking the streets of Springfield, Illinois, stirred from his eternal sleep, burdened by the tragedies of the modern world. But it's political history, it's poetry, it's walking at midnight, it's all the things that we're talking about on this podcast in one. The poem goes, It is portentous and a thing of state that here at midnight in our little town, a mourning figure walks and will not rest near the old courthouse, pacing up and down. He cannot sleep upon his hillside now. He is among us as in times before, and we who toss and lie awake for long breathe deep and start to see him pass the door. And in front of the West Virginia State Capitol, there is a statue of Abraham Lincoln with the inscription, Abraham Lincoln walks at midnight. And he looks very forlorn, but there you go. There's our connection with all the things we're talking about, politics and poetry and walking at night. So I don't know. That's not a Terry Tempest Williams level poem, so I don't think we should share that. But it was a nice find.
I like it.
Yeah, it's all right. And I could see, Lincoln, what we know about Lincoln and his head state, I could see him definitely sorting some stuff out as he was walking around at midnight, for sure. All right. Well, we will leave it there. Bianca Giaever, thank you for doing this, and thank you for making Constellation Prize. There's a ton more in that series. 4 parts, right? All out now? Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Of course. People should go check that out. And Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Dear Terry, it was cold tonight, 58 degrees. I went walking with my roommate Matt. We had just had a fight about how much butter to use while cooking. We found a mailbox with no house attached and made some sounds with it. Will Matt ever get married? We wondered if you were walking with someone or alone.
Dearest Bianca, I loved receiving your letter, and I love hearing that you were walking with your roommate Matt. Walking tonight, dear Bianca, is walking with you and Matt. It's amazing how travel and being together is now in the mind. Imagination is my greatest companion. I have never known the reach of my solitude. The cacophony of crickets and all manner of insects is rich tonight. And it's hard to see where the dirt road is without moonlight. As long as I can hear the crunching of gravel beneath my feet, I am on the right path.
Radiotopia.